So, how many narcissists does it take to change a light bulb? None. They don't use light bulbs, they use gaslighting. When we talk about relationships, rarely do we talk about gaslighting and narcissism, and yet it's one of the most prevalent reasons why we find ourselves in what I would call kind of sticky situations in our relationships and situations that we don't know how to get out of. So today, let's go talk about relationship gaslighting and narcissism. Join me. Imagine this scenario. You meet someone amazing who matches your values, has it all together. You're on a great trajectory in your career and financially, and basically someone who ticks all your boxes. And then a couple of days, perhaps even months, or years go by, and that feeling you once had is riddled with self-doubt, anxiety, isolation. Perhaps you're feeling restless, unsettled, and may even develop unexplained physical symptoms as a result of how you're made to feel in this relationship. You could be on the receiving end of narcissistic abuse, and that's why on today's edition of the Sit Down Relationships, we're in conversation with clinical psychologist Viwe Dweba and dating coach Dudu Nhlabathi-Madonsela, identifying the red flags and blind spots to look out for if you're in a relationship with a narcissistic partner. We also unpack the emotional abuse we seldom talk about, which is gaslighting. Thank you so much for joining me today to have this very important conversation. But before we start, I just want to play a clip that somebody sent to us at the sit down. Please play it.
Hi, Oletu. As a survivor of narcissistic abuse, I do think it's quite an important conversation to have, to raise awareness, especially amongst women who might be going through narcissistic abuse but quite unaware of it. And obviously, narcissistic abuse doesn't only happen in relationships. It can happen in the workplace and in friendships or from family members. But I do think in relationships, it causes the most damage. In my experience, when I got into that relationship, I was not aware at all of narcissistic abuse, but I was experiencing a lot of silent treatment and stonewalling, which is what led to me trying to get some information and getting online and just researching about silent treatment, which led to me finding out about narcissism, and everything that was in those articles was basically describing what I was going through in my relationship. In the beginning, everything was great, and I think the tools of a narcissist will begin with love bombing, and this is where you are given the best attention. You feel like you've met the love of your life, and then once that changed, this is where the abuse starts, and nothing is ever the same after that. You know, you're being gaslit, stonewalled, silent treatment is given, triangulation where they start cheating on you and introducing a third party into the relationship to make you jealous and drive you crazy. The crazier you become, the more you're being gaslit and being told that you're just a jealous and person and insecure, and you're overreacting. And if you keep on confronting these situations, then you are stonewalled and not spoken to for a couple of days, which is supposed to make you beg for attention and be the one that reconciles without any apology. That cycle never breaks. It just continues forever until the day you decide to leave. And when you decide to leave, this is where the narcissist introduces a smear campaign. Spreading lies, lying about you. They'll tell your family members that you're crazy, you do this, you're jealous, you're insecure, you're always going through their phones, you're the one that's stalking them. But meanwhile, all of these things were just a setup for you to look like a bad person. So information is key, just to get to know what you're dealing with. Not that it would empower everybody to leave those relationships, but there is no winning with a narcissist. You just have to leave. There's no way you can win against a narcissist.
Phew.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've all been through our fair share of narcissism and gaslighting. I've never met a woman who hasn't been gaslit or had an experience with a narcissist. I'm still yet to meet one. So let's start at the beginning. What is gaslighting and what is narcissism? I'm going to start with you, Viwe.
So when we're talking about narcissism, we're talking about a personality structure. Someone can have characteristics of a narcissistic personality versus also having the full-blown personality disorder. When we're talking about gaslighting, we're talking about one of the tools of abuse with a narcissist. So narcissism would be that personality that kind of thrives on external validation, actually. And where it comes from is from a place that is deep-seated within them of actually almost self-loathing, the lowest self-esteem. And so they need that external praise, that sense of being viewed as a lot more special than everyone else around them. And they're constantly looking for ways to do that in their environment because actually they can't access self-esteem and a sense of worth internally.
And I read a quote somewhere where it said, narcissists will tell you all the lies about yourself because they do not have truth within themselves. And from, your perspective, Dudu, narcissists, gaslighters?
So, the more I speak to people, I realize that, one, I think this whole thing around mental illness and personality disorder, especially as the Black community, we're only discovering it right now, right? And it's very hard to say, okay, how do you identify if somebody has a personality disorder and how do you identify if somebody has a mental illness? And I have this analogy and I say, people are like toys. There are some toys, you buy them and they are damaged from the beginning, right? There are some toys, you have them and you have to replace the battery and the battery works again. And I always say a personality disorder, it's like one social worker said to me, it's very hard to cure a personality disorder. And hence why, and I like what the lady said to say, there is no winning because it's not something that it can be fixed overnight, and it's something that really needs some serious intervention. And I find that gaslighting is a tool which they use in order to control the person. So I found that one of the things that are very big for a narcissist or somebody who has a narcissistic trait is they must always feel like they're in control. I mean, I was speaking to somebody we're talking about domestic violence, and studies show that most of the people who engage in domestic violence, where they are the abuser, usually have some kind of personality disorder. Not all, but most of them. And I asked and I said, when does it become violent? And he said, when they feel they no longer can control you, when you fight back. That's when. So it seems like control, the ability to dictate to you how you should live your life or how you should see yourself in most instances, is one of the biggest things that a narcissist needs in order to thrive.
Then what is the architectural makeup of it? Do you see it from the onset? Can you pick it up from the get-go?
Absolutely. I think if I'm thinking about my training now, part of what we're trained on as psychologists is you've got to listen to yourself, listen to your feelings, listen to what's going on with you as you're sitting with someone in a session. And there is a response because, of course, what we do in our relationships outside, when we come into the therapy room, we do them between us and our therapists. So when we're talking about personality, we're talking about something that was damaged in a relational space, because that's how personality disorders develop. They're early on in life, they're pervasive, and it's a distorted way in which someone experiences the world and someone experiences themselves, which affects how they move in relationships. So when we're talking about the narcissistic personality, there are two types. There's the thin-skinned narcissist and the thick-skinned narcissist. Usually, the kind of example we use for a thick-skinned narcissist is the Donald Trump, where it's very difficult to break that shell. But with a thin-skinned narcissist, they're especially volatile because they're incredibly sensitive to criticism. And that thin skin on top gets ruptured very quickly. And that's where you see kind of those outbursts, that aggressive attack against anything that they experience as making them feel smaller than they are.
Why is it so hard to diagnose it? Because once again, it's very few and far between that therapists are able to say, this is narcissism that we're picking up.
Actually, it's surprisingly not that rare, actually. The thing that happens is that there are the characteristics. So someone doesn't necessarily have a full-blown personality disorder, but you'll have some characteristics of it because there are some things that you experienced in childhood that distorted the development of your personality. Narcissistic personality disorder is actually more common among men, for instance. And it's really about either a lack of nurturing in the sense of self-esteem. So someone who wasn't, if we think of a plant, the plant wasn't watered enough. And so because they didn't receive what they needed to receive in terms of validation, in terms of what we need as people, as our self-esteem and sense of self develops, they didn't get enough. So that personality develops to compensate for what is actually deprivation inside themselves and deprivation in a relationship. That's one type of narcissist. The other type of narcissist would be the plant that is overwatered. So they were given too much validation, unrealistic sort of mirroring of who they are. And they believe this inflated version of themselves. And that's more the thicker skinned narcissist that you see. The underwatered plant would be the thinner skinned narcissist. So if we kind of think about the narcissistic personality, it's about that. It's about, was I watered? Was I not watered enough? Or was I watered too much? And that personality develops around either deprivation or excess in that relationship.
And Dudu, you've probably experienced or seen a lot of narcissists and gaslighters in the work that you do as a dating coach.
And I think, what's sad is that we speak a lot about the people who are exerting this in the relationship. There's also an addiction to such people. We talk about F-boys and all these people, and if you look at them, most of them are either classic narcissist or they have that narcissistic behavior. And I think, Viwe, as a psychologist, probably she could advise us to say, is there also a something wrong with somebody who continuously engages in this behavior? Because when you are dating a narcissist, it can never end well. It's a very traumatic relationship to recover from. So when you see somebody entering the same kind of trauma and repeating that cycle, it becomes a little bit concerning because it's almost like they're just addicted to it. So in my view, I get concerned when somebody is addicted to this particular type of trauma because, maybe we could discuss this to say, why is it that they keep repeating this particular cycle, especially this particular traumatic cycle? Because when somebody comes to me and they say, and I can pick up, they either have a childhood trauma that has led to a personality disorder, I refer them to a psychologist. I'm like, come back when you've dealt with the underlying issue. And then you have people who come to me whereby they don't have an underlying trauma that drives their behavior. But now, during the years, they've picked up this bad cycle of engaging with the same people. And I'm always like, I'm stuck. Are you now, I don't know, maybe they now need, therapy of some sort in either to recover from that. But it's a very funny cycle.
I think it's a case where they coddle a type of personality that happens to be a narcissist.
It's almost like they romanticize. They actively attract this person. Like Viwe said, you see it very early. I always say men have a template, especially, and everyone, whether it's men or women, we have a template. If I use, so for example, I'm a coquette, and my personality type is as such that I'm extremely good at playing hard to get. So if I had to be single again and enter the dating market, guess what? I'll revert to that template. And so does a narcissist personality or somebody who's very good at gaslighting. They revert to that template very quickly. You don't even have to spend months with this person to see that. And they pick it up very, very quickly. I even see it in my social circles. But there's this thing that, I can do something about it. And I'm like, it's early on, just walk away. There's so much work in trying to fix this person.
I want to challenge that because there's an element. Narcissists are so meticulous at what they do, right? So you might know, but what alters you is the fact that they show a sunny side to the outside world. So the outside world thinks you're with this perfect person, with this amazing guy, for example. And they work with the outside world to kind of create this portrait. So even though you know something's wrong, who do you revert to? Because everybody's telling you, Aibo, he's a good guy. Well, like, what? I don't see it. And because we're also as women raised, I think to a certain extent, to also kind of double question ourselves as to certain things that are happening, you also need, like, you use people as a mirror of, am I imagining this? What do you think?
So the tricky thing with being with a narcissist is that there's almost this kind of different reality bubble that you're in, kind of that narcissistic world that you are in, where he or she is doing two things. So when you have a narcissistic personality, what you're trying to do is you're trying to get a sense of self-worth, a sense of validation, a sense of self-esteem, actually. You're constantly looking for that externally because, again, you can't produce it internally. The other thing you're trying to do is you're trying to avoid shame or feeling belittled or feeling rejected in any way. And that is the part that projects that image onto the world. You don't want to be shamed, you don't want to be seen as less than. But what you do is you project that onto your partner. That feeling of feeling small, feeling worthless, feeling like you're not valuable, which is so deeply embedded in them and deeply defended against that they're not actually consciously aware of it. So that whole thing of, are you going to believe your own eyes and your own feelings over me? And so you doubt yourself so much. So getting to the point where you can actually say something is wrong here is a long journey. It's an incredibly difficult journey. And of course, there are kind of different types of personalities that are more likely to attract a narcissist and that a narcissist is more likely to be attracted to. Because of course, if one narcissist is with another narcissist, that's unlikely to work. Because what's going to happen is they're going to clash a lot. Each person is trying to feel big and important in their world, and each person is hypersensitive to perceived criticism. It may not be criticism, but it'll look like it, from their perspective. So two narcissists don't work together. But when you have more of a dependent personality, where you are relying on your partner to do things that you should be doing for yourself internally, like that sense of confidence that I can do something for myself, a sense of agency and autonomy, self-confidence, when you rely on your partner to give you those things, then you have a lot more of a dependent personality. And a dependent personality will go very well with a narcissistic personality because they need to control, but your personality structure is such that you are looking for someone to control you as well because you are wanting someone to kind of externally do what you should be doing for yourself internally. Something that perhaps, kind of in childhood, in your development, you weren't given the resources to be able to.
Does it have anything to do sometimes with, this idea as well of women wanting to give men, and most, like we said, in most cases it's men, right? Want to give men the right to be men. And you're allowing a narcissist to thrive and to be a narcissist.
This is where our socialization as women makes things difficult for us, actually. Because the way we're socialized as women is that you take a backseat to your partner. The whole head of the household, man of the house thing, submit to your partner, which the submission thing is very tricky for me because I also feel that it's a choice that a woman can make. Submission doesn't mean that you're any less important. It's about you having a certain trust in your partner that he will be able to kind of lead our family and protect our family. But that ability to trust your partner to do that comes from your ability to trust yourself. But the kind of sometimes very unhealthy ways that we are socialized into that is that we are taught that you submit, you say yes, you say how can I help you, you say I am your helper and I am nothing more than that. So our socialization gets in the way of us being able to feel like we can stand up for ourselves, we can create a different reality for us in our relationships.
And I also think there's an inner conflict because as women, we are nurturers. And naturally so, I believe that we just want to nurture. So what happens is that when we meet a narcissist, instead of taking the decision that I'm just going to walk away, we want to nurture this person into getting, they'll get better. There's another side. They always say when somebody is with, especially somebody who's abusive, They experience two sides of a person. They'll tell you they're extremely caring, but sometimes they hit me, right? And we're like, the nurturing side wants to get this person to the other side where they're constantly caring. And I think that's the inner conflict and the socialization that we have as women to say, it's very difficult for us to walk away because we're dealing with that inside and saying, am I doing the right thing? And we consult other women, and other women are like, no.
But he's so nice. He's
Yeah,
so amazing. But he did this for you
No,
the
but
other day.
relationships are work, girl. You know, no man is perfect. And they don't take things into perspective, and they only see one side of a person while you see the person completely. And I think that's where the conflict in terms of, do I walk away? I might recognize this very quickly, but do I walk away or do I stay?
And I mean, there's also there's the saying that goes, you know, a narcissist is like being taken to prison. Everything you say will be used against you. How much of that is very present in the early signs of being with a narcissist? And let me come to you, Dudu, and then I'll come to you.
I think to Viwe's point around the thin-skinned one, you see that a lot, especially the hypersensitive, right? So you have to understand is that because a narcissist at some point in their life, they felt that I'm either not in control or I'm constantly attacked, right? So they collect evidence. Their way of breaking down a person is to say that I need to strategize, I need to sit and collect evidence, and when the time is right, I need to strike, right? So you might be saying things, you know, innocently out there, but they're busy collecting evidence to say, one day I'm going to use this against this person. And I'm using it not necessarily in their head. You have to also understand how they rationalize. They're not rationalizing it that I'm going to use it to hurt this person. They are saying that, you know what, it's a justification. They think, I need to seek justice. So you're hurting me, so I need to seek justice and I need to hurt you. And I'm going to hurt you in the best way. And they want to deliver almost like the last punch. They are the control freak. I want to win. I want to deliver the last punch. And that's what happens with them is that as everything is used against you, they think if you sit down with them, they think it's absolutely justified. She did this, she hurt me, she undermined me, she did this. And you are like unaware of what you did. And they're saying that I'm going to seek justice and I'm going to collect all these things. And one day I'm going to make her feel what I felt. And it's all about that. I'm going to make it, she's going to feel what I felt because it seems like, you know, she just can't get away with it. She has to. She has to feel what I felt.
And that kind of speaks to kind of a narcissist's primary defense mechanism, which is about projecting. So projecting that sense of feeling small, that pain, that kind of sense of inadequacy. And, you know, kind of speaking to what you're saying now, you know, they will collect evidence because everything clocks in their minds. Everything that is perceived to be sort of, we call it a narcissistic injury. You know, someone nicked your skin, someone made you feel small in some way. I will not sit with that. They are incapable of sitting with that feeling of feeling small, so they're projected onto their partner. So as much as it is about sort of that seeking justice for themselves, you will not get away with this, you will not have one up on me. It's also about I am completely incapable of feeling small, so I am going to give that feeling to you. I'm going to project it onto you, because actually I can't hold it at all.
And Viwe, don't you think it's this thing, because when I look at both the victim and the perpetrator, is that it's about self-knowledge. You know, the question you asked earlier about self-knowledge, and both parties, the perpetrator and also the victim of abuse, if you know what is for your highest good, if you know what makes me happy, and that's why you're saying that the dependent personality is more likely to become a victim, because there's the lack of self-knowledge. So what I find is that, you know, whether you're dealing with any kind of toxic behavior, be it a narcissist or somebody else, if you are very aware of what serves you, what makes you happy, what makes you complete, regardless of what everybody thinks about your partner, you'll make the best decision, right? And the same with a narcissist. If a narcissist understands where are the triggers coming from, because we all have triggers in life, right? It's just that his expression of his triggers are more toxic than probably an average healthy-minded human being. But if they understand that this is what triggers me, or this deep-seated hurt comes from a time in my childhood where this happened, then they can be able to seek help. And I think that's the only solution for this, is that we require both knowledge from both parties. The one party to understand that if I have this nagging feeling that, yes, this person is sending me to Paris, but something is not right, you know, he's either changing my whole wardrobe and I feel like I'm being controlled, then that person needs to understand, why doesn't it sit well with me? And why do I feel that I cannot be in a relationship like this? And if you're a narcissist, because you get feedback all the time, whether it's somebody screaming back at you and saying, you are a horrible person, or it's going to take a ripple effect in your other relationships. Usually those people are terrible bosses, they're terrible co-workers, they have all sorts of issues, terrible classmates. If you're receiving that feedback from the world, there's a requirement, and this is for your own personal self-growth, to reflect and say, why am I mirroring this? Why is it when I look in the mirror, these are the words that I see, this is what the world is saying to me. What are the triggers? Where does it come from? And I think this conversation, because what I find is that most of the time we have this conversation, it's around, oh, yes, as women, we are victims of this. And I acknowledge that we are victims of that. But also we have to have the conversation to say, we've been speaking about empowerment and empowerment as a female species. How do we take that to the next level? I think also what we need to think about is that how are we going to equip our daughters not to repeat the cycle? And I think that's the conversations we should be having. Yes, we are victims. Yes, as females, we've been dispositioned for a very long time. But we are slowly getting into the position of power. And how do we stop repeating that cycle? And I think it's one, the ability to recognize. So when you're listening to this conversation, I hope they're taking that, how do I recognize that I am with this person? How do I recognize how I am an enabler? Because once you get to the point where, yes, I'm a victim, but I'm also an enabler, how do I stop being an enabler? And hence you will see a change, because then you would say, I will no longer engage in this behavior. Because a narcissist needs somebody to control.
And I think let's also get into we mentioned that one of the tools is gaslighting. How does gaslighting then appear? Because at first, I think we never had the language for gaslighting. We've only just kind of gotten into the language of what gaslighting is and picking it up. But how does it present itself?
In tiny ways in the beginning, in tiny ways that you dismiss as you having gotten things wrong. Kind of that term gaslighting actually comes from a 1944 movie called Gaslight. And it was this husband who was manipulating his wife. And part of the manipulation to kind of make her kind of feel like she's lost her mind was he was fiddling with the lights. He kept on turning the lights on and off, and they were gas lights. And it's like that, kind of those tiny ways that you're made to doubt your perception of things. So little things like, you see a flirtatious SMS on his phone. Maybe he's given you his phone for whatever reason, and there's some flirtatious SMS.
And it just so happens that he opens up the phone and unlocks it and gives it to you with that flirtatious message.
Yes, yeah. And it's
Because make sure that happens, eh?
Depending on actually how bad he's feeling, he may induce jealousy in you because he's looking for that validation constantly. I need her to feel like she might lose me so that she comes closer to me. She chases me because I need to feel that. The moment you stop doing that with a narcissist, he's going to go find it somewhere else. Doesn't matter where he finds it. That's why with narcissistic personalities, good luck finding one that's faithful. Good luck, because they're constantly looking for that validation. When validation comes their way, when a girl comes, a pretty girl, a pretty woman, an accomplished woman that they can use as a trophy, as a thing to say that I have this beautiful thing. No matter how many come, they will not say no, because that validation is necessary actually for their sense of worth, because they don't have it internally.
And it's interesting that you say they constantly want you to chase. So if you look at gaslighting, somebody focuses on your insecurities and slowly goes into it. You know, there's an art called the pickup artist. They call them pickup artists, and it's the psychology of getting women to bed. And one of the techniques they have is called nagging. So nagging is, I make you feel good, but then I make you doubt yourself. Then I make you feel good. And if you're with a person, so for example, if I'm sitting with someone, I remember at a party, I was telling them that I've read the book, The Game, and these guys, they were like, yeah, but I don't think you know enough about dating coaching. And I'd want to justify myself. And halfway I was like, no, they're nagging me. I'm actually working hard to get their validation, to say, oh, okay, actually, I think that I'm good enough.
Gaslighting.
And that's what they do. They nag you. They look for your insecurities, what makes you tick. And they make you doubt yourself, but also work harder for their affirmation, right? That's the word. To say, oh, but you're not that bad, you know. Yeah, but you're not that bad. You know, it's loops. You have to jump over them and jump over them. And it's redirecting. So what they do is that it's almost like I feel caught out. I want to redirect this energy of I feel I'm embarrassed, I'm stupid, or you know what, I'm not doing right to you, because I don't want to admit. Narcissists do not want to admit that they're wrong. They just, it's not part of their genetic makeup, I guess.
Like, I'm sorry, I can't. Let's rather find a way for me to be like, maybe you could have looked at it in a different way.
I always advise, if a woman is dealing with a narcissist, the good book to read is called The Game, because it talks about the dark psychology of the art of influence. And then you'd understand that they want to influence, they want you to get you to do what they are doing, but obviously it comes from a very dark-seated place. And until you understand what drives a narcissist, you realize rationalizing with them is something that, you know, is not possible. And what confuses a lot of people is that narcissists, a lot of them are highly intelligent. They're not just people who are going about expressing their insecurities. Some of them are highly intelligent. So people can't reconcile that I'm trying to talk sense into you. And what people see is that you're this great person at work, you're doing presentations, you sound intelligent, you speak big English. Why is it that I cannot rationalize with you? And you can't. Like I said, they are a damaged toy. There's a default somewhere, and you can't fix it. You know, they need professional help to fix it. And I think when somebody reads The Game and understands that this was written from a place of dark psychology, and the person who's practicing it is the one winning. The person who's receiving it can never win. It was never, this game was never designed so that you as the victim can win. The only way you can win is to step aside and let this person carry on their journey and hope it's a journey of healing.
No, and you know, narcissism, the way that it's played out in the world, the way that we've seen it, they do continuously win, right? Even when they have a mind, and they view them as minor losses, because obviously it's all about me, it's my world, you live in it, I'll give you this one, but I'm getting the next round. They leave disaster in their, like, in their aftermath. Everywhere they go, they leave brokenness and disaster. So is it fair to say narcissists change? That their patterns ever change?
That is unfortunately not likely, unless someone actually goes to therapy. You have to go to therapy and work through those dynamics and work through those parts of you that have needed that narcissistic defense to function in the world. And the issue is the way narcissistic personalities are set up is that because you don't think there's anything wrong with you, because you externalize everything. There's something wrong with the people around me. It's not me, it's my boss. My boss doesn't recognize me. It's not me, it's my wife. You know, she's unreasonable. She doesn't recognize how amazing I am. They're unlikely to go to therapy saying, I think I have a problem. They'll go to therapy because, and I've seen this a lot in my offices, they'll probably go to therapy because they're addicted to something, whether it's alcohol or drugs or whatever it is, or because they're depressed actually, because also how they see themselves, how they experience themselves is very different to how the world experiences them. And so when what they feel about themselves doesn't match what they're actually achieving in the world, because there's always that mismatch, because they think they're much greater than they actually are.
And you know, Viwe, we've also designed a world that is a big enabler for narcissists. Be it that in the workplace and corporate, whereby the person who shows the least vulnerability is the person who wins the most, right? To where how we've designed our idea of a fairy tale. A fairy tale is an alpha male. He is Prince Charming. He is the guy who saves the day. He takes control and so forth. So we've unconsciously designed a world that idolizes them, and that's why they seem like they're winning all the time, because if I'm with Dudu and Dudu doesn't like the fact that, you know, I can never be vulnerable with her, I can always go out there and the woman says, oh, but you know what, Dudu, that's Dudu's loss. I'm going to date him anyway. Even if Dudu stands on a pedestal and says, this person's like this and this, oh no, but he seems like he's in control. As long as there are women out there who are still wanting to date this guy.
sorry to disturb you, Dudu, but do narcissists then have that pattern of, I will leave you and give Viwe a glimmer of what I did not give you until I can work into her? Because obviously there's that, you think, it's Dudu's loss. She's, he's such an amazing guy. But then I start off by being a little bit vulnerable with you, and then I start working you. Because, Dudu's standing on pedestals saying this guy is not vulnerable, he's full of himself, he's full of... But I show you a whole different side, whilst I'm still trying to work you.
Well, that's the thing. In the beginning with a relationship with a narcissist, it is actually beautiful. It's the love bombing. He's coming through, showering you with compliments, buying you flowers constantly. He seems like he's attuned to your needs. You feel good when you're with him. He's inflating you as well. But once you start developing that emotional intimacy, the truth of his personality or her personality starts coming out. So by the time he leaves the relationship with you, Dudu, it's because the relationship feels like an untenable situation for him, because you have started to maybe see through what is going on.
Or his method doesn't work.
His method doesn't work anymore, because perhaps with the support of your friends, who will see your relationship more clearly than you will be able to, now he can no longer do what he did to you. So he moves on to the next person who doesn't know what he's like.
Exactly.
He comes to me, I don't know what he's like. It feels good for me because he's showering me with everything. But once I get to that point that probably you got to as well, it becomes an untenable situation for him again. On to the next person who doesn't know what he's like.
And Oluwatu, this is something that I'm going to share as a dating coach, which a lot of dating coaches would not like to share, right? Is that there is a method to dating. There's a method, and once you discover that method, it's called the art of, I would call it the art of manipulation. So if you want to be very good at dating, you need to remove your emotions. Then you can be extremely good at it, because you can move from one situation to another without feeling touched. The minute now there's emotions, that's when you have to dig deep, and it also leads to you doing introspection and personal development.
And that's actually my next question. The psychological effect of dating a narcissist and having to detach yourself, because now you have to detach yourself not only from the situation, but the person. And we fall in love hard. Now you're not just detaching yourself from this mental illness this person had.
And remember, if you have a method to say, I want this person to be attached to me, you're going to create a world whereby they are solely dependent on you. So the biggest thing is not, you might be financially dependent on this person. So it's not only now leaving this person psychologically and dealing with a broken heart. You also, I have to leave this person because, you know what, he's formed a strong bond with my kids. Now I'm breaking that bond. Financially, I can't stand on my own. Now I'm breaking that bond. Usually, like for example, some of them would help you establish a career. They were your biggest fans. And now without this person now, where's my source of inspiration? So that's what they do. And that's why it's very difficult for people to leave, because it's not a matter of, that's why I always say, leave early. Because the more you're in it, if I was a narcissist and I wanted to keep you, trust me, I will create a whole spider web around you so that it's very, very difficult to leave me. Because also we have to realize they have abandonment issues, right? So most often than not, in most cases, you find the narcissist will be the one who will say, I left Olwethu. I'm the one who left her. I wasn't interested in her, because they don't want to feel abandoned. So they will create this web whereby they will do what they need to do to keep you until they feel like, I don't need to keep you anymore.
Sure.
And the discarding thing is more about they discard you before you discard them. Because of course they're always trying to save face. And that's where something like a smear campaign would come up, where now they're bad-mouthing you to your friends. I've known of situations where people have threatened to go to people's work and mess things up there for them. But that smear campaign is about them saving face. They are completely distracting from the fact that this person left me. This person is no longer in a situation where they actually want to be with me. And
reminds me of the news cafe guy crashing into news cafe in Rosebank.
How hectic is that?
Yeah.
So they are constantly trying to protect themselves from that.
And let's go back to the psychology question. You know, there's been many instances of women trying to make sense of, you know, I'm not alone, and I'm not the only person who wants this person, but I want him. You know, and narcissists thrive on that. I'm not the only person who wanted this person. But mina I won.
But that's the dynamic that they create in their relationships. You must feel like you are grateful for being with me. I did you a favor. I wanted you when perhaps no one else of my stature, no one else at my level wanted you. But here I am, gracious and seeing you for the amazing person you are, saved you from, you know, kind of the dregs of the dating pool. So that dynamic is created where he makes you feel grateful for the fact that you're with him. And even if there isn't necessarily actually a line at his door with women who want to be with him, that's the reality that he creates between the two of you,
and
that narcissistic bubble.
You know, when it comes to dating, the easiest guys to control are the Mr. Can't Believe. The Mr. I can't believe I got the girl. Because the whole idea is that you must present yourself as a prize, as something that is beyond his wildest imagination. And what you do, you go and find somebody who is probably a weaker target in your dating pool, because somebody who's complete, you could present yourself as the biggest prize in the world. They don't need you to complete them, but you deliberately look for those particular people. And that's what they do psychologically, is that they look for people who are looking for the prize in them.
And that's why there's so much psychological damage after a narcissistic relationship, because there is that sense of dependence that he's going to create, whether it's financial or it's familial, or you live in the house that he bought, and it was your house together. But now that you guys are breaking up, it's no longer your house together, it's just his house.
Well, there's conflict.
Well, there's
it's my house, by the way.
It's my house, by the way.
Reminder.
Don't forget where you are. Don't forget that everything you have is because of me. And it's about undoing yourself from that, but it's also from undoing everything inside you that now doubts yourself. Because he's broken you down to a point where your sense of self is now also tied to him, but you don't trust yourself anymore. And our ability to trust in relationships is completely dependent on our ability to trust ourselves. Trust that I can make a decent judgment call in terms of the people that I associate myself with. And once that is broken, the anxiety that comes with, it affects you at work as well. You don't trust yourself anymore. And when you can't trust yourself, you have a very hard time moving around in your life. You're constantly looking for that validation. And so you will actually need help after that.
Or attract another narcissist.
Because sometimes what we do is that so much can be taken from us in relationships that the only way we know how to recover is to jump headfirst into another relationship. So there is so much work that needs to be done after that relationship.
So let's start with the work. Where do I start? How do I, it doesn't necessarily have to even be a relationship, a romantic relationship. It could be your parent, could be a narcissist. A friend, a colleague, your boss. Where do I start picking up the pieces and setting boundaries?
The very first thing that is important is exactly what you're saying, setting those boundaries. Once you've identified what is kind of happening in this relationship, whether it's romantic or work or family, you need to have boundaries. You need to put things in place that protect you from that manipulation. And that sometimes can feel very cumbersome, because now you need to have evidence for the things that you say. No, you can't distort my sense of reality because I know what you said. Here's what you said. It can also help to have friends or family members who also are aware of what is going on. But that manipulation is something that is going to be the biggest thing that you need to protect yourself from. And you start with those boundaries. And often boundaries are distance. Add distance in that relationship.
And it's also realizing that the person knows what they're doing. Because often it's hard for us to leave because we think, they don't know, they aren't aware of themselves and so forth. They know, and they are actually doing it on purpose. And if somebody loves you, they won't treat you like that.
Okay, so Dudu, now you realized what you've gotten yourself into. You realized what this relationship is. You're being gaslit. You're with a narcissist. You have to try and find your way out, or you have to try and maneuver. Where do you start?
I think you have to understand where the links are first. you know, am I in any way dependent on this person? So you must devise a plan. If I'm financially dependent on this person, how am I going to cut the various links? And then treat it like grief. Go through it. Like, it's going to be teary, it's going to be rough, it's going to be tough. Do it. Like, the sooner you do it, the more you immerse yourself in the pain, the better it is. There is no kinder way. I wish I could tell people there's a kinder way, but there isn't a kinder way to do it.
Ooh, Viwe, is exiting the only way?
There is no fixing a personality disorder. There's no way to cure them, actually. We manage them in therapy because it's an internal kind of maladaptation of your defenses because of what you went through in childhood, in your very early formative years. There's no fixing a narcissistic personality, and the pull will be to want to fix it, but you go. You have to go, and cold turkey is the only way. And it will be hell. Because the way the narcissistic manipulation has now worked out is such that there are parts of you that are dependent on them, not only externally, but internally. And undoing yourself from that is going to feel like you're cutting pieces of yourself off. It's going to be hell. You are going to cry. You are going to want to go back a lot. And you've got to resist that urge, and sometimes you won't be able to resist that urge.
I know people that are divorced for a long time, but still say, maybe it could have worked out.
So I think one of the important things for me is someone has got to know, someone who can offer you emotional support. Whether it's a best friend or a sister or your mother, someone has got to know what you are leaving and what you've been going through. Because at some point in your grief, you are going to forget how hard things got. At some point when they try to pull you back, you're going to forget the pain that you went through. And you need someone to remind you of reality when those feelings come up. And they will come up often.
Sure. Yeah. This is this is real. A friend was just saying narcissism should actually be a criminal offense.
Oh yeah.
Or you know, I always think the Joker. The person who's dealing with a narcissist should think, I'm dealing with the Joker. And if you've watched Batman, you'd realize there is no hope for that guy at all.
It takes an incredibly long time, even in therapy, you know, long-term therapy, to manage the personality, not to change it. You know, often with personality disorders, they actually only settle much later in life, somewhere in your 50s, 60s.
Imagine.
They settle much later in life. Early on, you know, with your young narcissistic personalities, 20s, 30s, they're not going to go looking for help. They don't think they need help.
Because this works for them, and the world accommodates this kind of behavior.
The only way they end up in a therapy room is if things stop working to the point where they can't actually change anything. They're now hooked on substances, or, you know, everything has fallen apart. They've lost this job that gives them validation because they will have conflict in the workspace. They won't be able to maintain healthy work relationships. It's only when things have fallen apart and they've developed some sort of depression or alcohol or drug dependency that they find themselves in a therapy office. But it's never from a place of self-awareness where they say, I have some dynamics that I need to work on. There's something going on with me that is causing damage in my life and is hurting my relationships.
And hence we see a lot, like you mentioned, they're smart, they're intelligent, they're successful, and they're out there. We see it every day.
They thrive until they have a nervous breakdown.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. And Dudu, you've just finished your run in the Mina Nawe house. Congratulations.
Yeah.
You've got a new show coming up, I hear.
Yes.
There's a whisper in the wind.
Yeah, there's a show I'm doing. It's also a talk show. And it's quite interesting because a lot of these topics are present in that. As I was telling you, in our society, we have a lot to deal with and a lot to learn. But it's quite exciting. That's where I am. And yeah, saving one person at, well, not saving, empowering one person at a time.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. And how do we get hold of you and gain access to you, Viwe?
So I have an Instagram page at Viwe Dweba _psychology. I also have a work email address, dwebavp@gmail.com, where you can, you know, kind of send an email if you need help, if you need direction. If you want to book for a consultation, you can access me there.
Absolutely. I think we've got so much healing to do, and it starts with us being empowered to know who we are, to find ourselves. We will never allow a narcissist to even tamper within our space. Thank you so much for joining us for this edition of the Sit Down Relationships. Until next time.